Sienna is publishing your manuscript under her name. You owe her for letting you sleep on her couch, my mom scoffed at the New York book launch. I sat quietly in the back row. I didn't say a word until the publisher read the first letter of every chapter out loud to the press. The cameras caught every single word. After they deciphered what it spelled out, Sienna literally collapsed on the stage. The glaring stage lights of the independent Manhattan bookstore illuminated my sister Sienna, who sat in a plush velvet chair, holding a pristine, hardcover copy of a psychological thriller she did not write. My mother, Diane, sat in the folding chair next to me, leaning close enough for me to smell her expensive floral perfume as she delivered her cruel justification for my stolen intellectual property. Diane gripped my forearm, enforcing a silent demand for compliance while the crowd of literary critics and journalists settled into their seats. 6 months ago, a severe medical emergency drained my savings accounts and forced me to vacate my apartment, leaving me with no choice but to accept Sienna's offer to sleep on the uncomfortable love seat in her cramped Brooklyn living room. Sienna treated my misfortune as an opportunity to secure a live-in maid, demanding I clean her kitchen, do her laundry, and run her errands, in exchange for the meager square footage I occupied. I accepted the indignity because I needed a safe place to finish drafting my novel, a complex murder mystery I wrote between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. while Sienna slept. I typed in the dark, pouring my exhaustion and frustration into a twisting narrative about deception and stolen identities, keeping the document saved in a folder on my desktop. Sienna spent her days attempting to build a career as a lifestyle influencer, attending networking events and taking photographs of her expensive brunches, producing no actual tangible work while racking up credit card debt. During one of her industry parties, Sienna met Valerie, a high-profile literary agent looking for fresh voices in the thriller genre. Sienna, desperate for validation and fame, lied to Valerie and claimed she had just finished a groundbreaking manuscript. The following morning, while I was at the pharmacy picking up my medication, Sienna broke into my laptop, located my finished draft, and emailed the file to herself before deleting the original document from my hard drive to cover her tracks. I discovered the theft 3 days later when I opened Sienna's iPad to check the weather and saw an email from Valerie praising the manuscript and offering Sienna a lucrative representation contract. The betrayal hit me with physical force, but I knew confronting Sienna and Diane would yield no justice. Diane always favored Sienna, viewing her superficial charm as superior to my quiet diligence, and they would inevitably gaslight me, claim I was delusional, and throw me out onto the street. I needed a permanent, undeniable method of proving ownership, a trap they would spring on themselves in front of an audience too large to manipulate. Sienna possessed no literary talent and lacked the patience to actually read the 80,000-word document she stole, meaning she would never notice subtle structural changes. I waited until Sienna left for a weekend trip, accessed her cloud storage account using the password she carelessly left on a sticky note, and opened the manuscript file she intended to send to the publishing house for final formatting. I spent 48 hours rewriting the opening paragraphs of all 25 chapters, ensuring the narrative flow remained engaging while manipulating the first letter of the first word of each chapter. Chapter 1 began with the word shadows. Chapter 2 began with infections. Chapter 3 began with every. I meticulously constructed a 25-letter vertical acrostic, hidden in plain sight, saving the altered file over Sienna's version, just hours before she forwarded it to Valerie and the editors at Vanguard Press. Because editors focus on pacing, character development, and grammatical structure rather than looking for vertical codes, the manuscript moved through the publishing pipeline unchallenged. I quietly moved out of Sienna's apartment 2 weeks later, securing a modest studio in Queens, and filing an official copyright registration with the federal government using my original, time-stamped drafts, waiting patiently for the inevitable book launch. Now, sitting in the back row of the packed bookstore, I watched Sienna cross her legs and smile for the flashing cameras, soaking in the unearned admiration of the New York literary scene. Diane leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with a smug expression, satisfied that her golden child finally achieved the wealth and status she believed our family deserved. The launch event transitioned into a moderated discussion, featuring Sienna and the senior publisher of Vanguard Press, a sharp, distinguished man named Mr. Fredrickson. Fredrickson held the microphone, praising the intricate plotting of the novel and complimenting Sienna on her profound understanding of criminal psychology. Sienna laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder, offering generic, shallow responses about how her inspiration just naturally flows during her morning meditation sessions. She spoke in empty platitudes, claiming the characters spoke to her in her dreams, relying on a rehearsed charm to mask her total ignorance of the plot mechanics. The journalists in the front row took diligent notes, captivated by the false narrative of the glamorous young author who took the publishing world by storm. I opened my leather tote bag and rested my hand on a thick manila envelope containing my federal copyright certificate, copies of my original timestamp drafts, and a printed table of contents highlighting the acrostic. I watched Valerie, the literary agent, standing near the edge of the stage, nodding proudly at her new star client, unaware she staked her professional reputation on a fraud. Fredrickson opened the floor to a public question and answer session, inviting the press and attendees to approach the microphone stand positioned in the center aisle. Several aspiring writers asked Sienna about her daily routine, her outlining process, and her advice for overcoming writer's block. Sienna stumbled through the technical questions, giving vague answers about trusting the universe and buying expensive journals, drawing a few confused glances from the serious critics in the room. I stood up from my folding chair, ignoring Diane's sharp hiss demanding I sit back down, and walked calmly down the center aisle until I reached the microphone. The bright stage lights blinded me momentarily, but I kept my posture straight and my voice even. I looked directly at Sienna, watching her confident smile falter, replaced by a flicker of genuine panic as she realized the sister she treated like a servant was about to speak. I addressed Mr. Fredrickson instead of Sienna, projecting my voice through the speakers so every person in the room could hear me clearly. I complimented Vanguard Press on the beautiful physical design of the hardcover edition before asking Mr. Fredrickson if he could discuss the unique, structural choice the author made regarding the chapter openings. Fredrickson frowned, adjusting his glasses, asking me to clarify what specific structural choice I meant. I informed him the author embedded a hidden message in the book, a secret code intended to reveal the true nature of the narrative, and suggested he read the very first letter of the first word of every chapter out loud to the audience. Sienna gripped the armrests of her velvet chair, her eyes darting toward the exit doors. Diane stood up in the back row, her face flushed with anger, realizing she lost control of the situation. Fredrickson looked intrigued by the concept of a hidden code, viewing it as a brilliant marketing angle he somehow missed during the editing process. He opened his copy of the book to the table of contents and flipped to chapter 1. He leaned into his microphone, his deep voice carrying over the quiet room as he began to read. Chapter 1 starts with shadows. That is an S, Fredrickson stated, flipping the page. Chapter 2 starts with infections, an I. He continued flipping through the book, reading the first letters aloud in a steady, rhythmic cadence. ENNASTOLE. The audience remained silent, some journalists pulling out their own press copies and following along, writing the letters down in their notebooks. Fredrickson's voice slowed down as he reached the halfway point of the book, the realization of the forming words causing his professional demeanor to crack. THISFROM. Fredrickson stopped reading. He stared at the pages, his face draining of color, before looking up at Sienna with an expression of profound shock and rising fury. The silence in the bookstore grew suffocating, thick with the tension of a massive public scandal unfolding in real time. A journalist in the second row, having finished tracing the letters in her own copy, spoke the final message out loud, her voice cutting through the quiet room. Sienna stole this from my desk. The camera shutters erupted into a frantic chorus of clicks and flashes, capturing Sienna holding her hands over her face, attempting to hide from the blinding lights. Valerie marched onto the stage, her face pale, snatching the book out of Sienna's hands and examining the chapter openings herself. Diane pushed her way through the crowd, shouting that I hacked the publisher's servers and framed her daughter, a desperate and illogical defense that only drew more mocking attention from the press. I stepped away from the microphone, walked directly to the edge of the stage, and handed the manila envelope to Valerie. I informed the literary agent the envelope contained the federal copyright registration filed months before Vanguard Press acquired the manuscript, along with the digital forensic reports proving the original files originated on my hard drive. I told Valerie she signed a contract with a plagiarist who stole a manuscript to avoid getting a real job, and I expected Vanguard Press to redirect all future royalties to my bank account to avoid a massive intellectual property lawsuit. Fredrickson reviewed the documents over Valerie's shoulder, his expression hardening into cold corporate rage as he recognized the undeniable legal proof of my ownership. He instructed the audio technicians to cut Sienna's microphone and ordered his publicity team to escort Sienna off the stage immediately. Sienna broke down in tears, begging Valerie to listen to her, claiming she contributed to the creative process by giving me a place to sleep, a confession of theft recorded by 36 journalists. I turned my back on the stage, walking past Diane, who stood frozen in the aisle, her mouth open in silent shock as she watched her golden child face public and legal ruin. I walked out of the bookstore and into the cool Manhattan night, leaving my family to navigate the consequences of their arrogance while I prepared to sign a new contract under my own name.